Welcome back to the Tara Palmeri Show. Inside the Democratic Party, there is a generational showdown going on between David Hogg, the 25-year-old vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, and James Carville, the 80-year-old Democratic Party elder. Carville is furious with Hogg for his $20 million plan to back primary challengers who will take out older Democratic politicians in the name of bringing some fresh blood into the party.
Well, why don't somebody sue David Hogg? But I might give the DNC $10 and sue him. He's a contemptible little twerp.
They have been taking shots at each other from afar, but they have never had a chance to sit down and say it face to face. Until now.
What is your plan to deal with our abominable approval rating?
Win elections.
Watch James Carville and David Hogg in this must-listen interview as they duke it out over the future of the Democratic Party, which sits at a dismal 27% approval rating. I've got to warn you, it gets spicy, but has a very surprising ending. Take a listen here. Gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank you both for coming on the show. After interviewing David last week, I asked him to respond to a number of your comments, right, James, and I figured rather than doing a he said this, you said that, right, I'd rather just have you both on the show, since you are both like very seminal figures in the party, and especially at this moment as it's trying to figure its way forward. You both have different visions and opinions. So I wanted to start with like a very simple question, and I'll start with you, James. What does the Democratic Party stand for?
Well, right now it stands for defeat because we got beaten. People don't like it. But I think that we have a golden opportunity coming up on reconciliation, which is going to have to cause massive cuts in Medicaid, which will adversely affect middle-class people and lower middle-class people, quite frankly. And we have the renewal of the Trump tax cuts, which are hugely skewed. So I don't use the word oligarch. That's an ignorant word and no one knows. But toward the fat cats. I prefer the word fat cat, that is going to do. So I think if we can gel and make this our point of contact, I think we can reintroduce ourselves to the American people in a way that is pertinent and relevant to their lives. And I think we got to go all in, regardless of what we might think, what other differences we might have. I think every Democrat is united in the fact that we shouldn't mess with the healthcare of middle or lower middle income people, and we shouldn't be a party of fat cats. We should be a party of people who are trying to make it, not a party of people who already have it made. I think we can all get together on that.
What about you, David?
What do we stand for right now?
Yeah.
I think right now what we are standing for, mainly, I think that, and I would imagine James agrees with this, is the main message that people are hearing is just that we're against Donald Trump. That is not enough. We need to have a positive vision for the future. And I think what we should be standing for is talking about what is our vision and how are we fighting back against Donald Trump and the corruption that empowered him. What are we doing to revive the American dream? Since in the past 40 years, so many of the foundational building blocks of that dream have become astronomically more expensive and out of reach for far too many people, whether that is the cost of healthcare, whether that is the cost of education or housing, or so many of the foundational building blocks that enable people to get ahead. And I think the message that we need to have is, what are we doing to revive that American dream and fight back against the special interests that killed it, and also reform our campaign finance system to fight the corruption that is preventing it from being revived in the first place, and how Democrats are standing up to be a true opposition party to Donald Trump right now. That is what I think we need to be talking about, because right now, just having the message of we're just not Donald Trump is frankly not enough.
Yeah, but like, James, a few months ago, you had a piece in the New York Times, and you basically said that Democrats should just like play dead and let Trump sabotage himself.
Right.
This sounds very different
Right.
than what David is suggesting.
Well,
Is that right?
Well, first of all, it's kind of hard that everybody's saying the Democrats are playing dead, which might be some truth to that. And Trump is the lowest rated president at this point in history. So something is kind of working. I don't believe in getting in the way of people out of destroying themselves. But I think that the opposition to the Medicaid cuts and the tax cuts framed in the proper way can really give us a roadmap back. And remember, we're going to win Virginia by a lot. And that's going to be a seminal event in American politics. So if we make them pay a brutal price for Medicaid cuts, or maybe we might be fortunate enough to stop them. And if we make them pay a brutal price of, who knows, we might be fortunate enough to stop these tax cuts. I think we're going to be held in much higher esteem with the American people, and we're going to particularly be held in higher esteem when we win in Virginia, which we're going to do. Virginia is all about margin, and the
Hmm.
bigger the margin, the greater the effect.
So you think like a victory lap will be good for the party?
I think so, but I think it has to be I think if we win by 2.5 points, it'll be great. We'll control Virginia governors, but not much more. But if we go north of 5, I think it's going to grab the attention of a lot of people. And the point I'm making to Democrats is, let's go all in on Virginia and let's run up the margin. Let's run up the score. Let's
Mm.
we got a 50-0 lead. Let's throw on 4th down. Let's run it up as high as we can.
Okay, so James, you've had some words though for David and like what he's doing in terms of
Right.
supporting some primary challengers who are, that would be taking out perhaps like an older guard. It's not necessarily older people, but people that he says are asleep. And you said that members of the DNC should sue him for doing this since since David is a member of the party leadership. He is the vice
I
chairman.
think he's a vice chair. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
he's the
think
vice.
let me be very specific. I think it is abominable that an official of a political party who is being paid or supported by that political party to go out and raise money to defeat members of the same party. I think that's a jackassery of the highest level.
James, can
And,
you tell
and
me
if
what
you
a vice
want to,
chair does?
if you want to beat Republicans, of which of course lefties never do, they never even run against them. That's one thing. I'm not into beating Democrats. I'm into beating Republicans.
James, I would say, first of all, I am not paid to be a vice chair. The vice chair role is not a paid role at all.
Okay.
It's a volunteer role.
All
What
right.
I would also say to that is that I think it's possible for us to do two things at once. We do, at my organization, Leaders We Deserve, support challenging Republicans that are in very vulnerable seats. And last cycle, we helped to break the majority for Democrats to have a one-seat majority in the Virginia state legislature by spending $100,000 to do that. We spent $100,000 to support the candidate who broke the supermajority in North Carolina. We spent $1 million on frontline races that were critical to helping break majorities in states around the country and also reduce the size of Republican majorities that they have there, even if they didn't end up breaking the majority in total. And I think what we need to do right now is both things. We need to make sure that people have the strongest representation possible. Like, James, I imagine that you think that Hakeem Jeffries is doing a relatively good job, right?
Well, it doesn't matter that I think he is. I think he's doing fine, but the caucus thinks he is. I was invited
Right.
to speak to the caucus, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks ago. And my job, I think about it, to the extent I have one, is to beat Republicans. And I just will tell you right to your face, I think it's abominable that you have anything to do with the DNC and you're going to go and raise $20 million to beat other Democrats. I don't
So,
think other
James,
Democrats are the problem we have in the United States today. I think it's Republicans. And I think all of our efforts and all of our force should be going to elect Republicans.
James,
Beat
I think that
Republicans. I can't make it any simpler than that.
there is a real danger, though. You just talked about how those Medicaid cuts were terrible, obviously. Those were enabled by two of our members literally passing away, unfortunately. Right there, that is a real problem that we have to deal with.
Y'all always remind me that I'm close to the day too. Every time you say something, you remind people how old I am. By the way, David, just one correction. Y'all say I hadn't been involved in U.S. politics since 2000. It's actually been 1994. You make me too current. I haven't done American electoral politics as a profession since 1994. Now I've done 22 different countries in 14 different heads of state. But you're right. The criticism is right. I have not worked in American politics since
And
'94, which is 31 years.
I think, James, let me just say, I have a lot of respect for the work that you did in electing Bill Clinton. That was something that was pretty remarkable that you did, obviously. I think that part of the challenge that we have right now is the electorate has shifted so much over the past 30 years that I hope that we win the majority in Virginia, obviously. And I'm sure I'm going to be out there knocking doors to support defeating Republicans across that state. What I'm very concerned about, though, is the voters that are deciding these elections that are helping to elect, specifically deciding the presidential, are low propensity, low information voters that are predominantly getting their information from social media. It's a lot of younger people, too, who don't necessarily have a college degree. And I think part of what we need to do is make sure that we're giving people something to vote for. And right now, with our approval ratings being where they are in the Democratic Party, what I would like to know from you, James, is what do you think that we need to do to improve that? Because I worry if we don't address the approval rating
Right.
that we have right now from our own base, it's going to be a lot harder to win back the House. So what do we do to address that?
Well, first of all, but what I do is Governor Spanberger's campaigns asked me to send out solicitations and to communicate with other Democrats in support of her. So I'm obviously happy to do this, as do, despite of the fact that I'm washed up. I'd like to give you a list of the names of campaigns that asked me to send out things on their behalf and raise money, but that's not the case. I'm for all of that, okay? And I'm for people. I think people like you, and you're right. We don't do as nearly as well as we should with young people. What I wanted the Harris campaign to do, the Democrats to do, was raise taxes on incomes over $400,000 and use the money for a first-time home buyers or rental relief fund. Okay, I think we should signal to young people that they're there, but I don't think the way to do that is to run against other Democrats, particularly other Democrats in swing districts. That's
No,
my,
no, no,
that's my
James,
whole.
But
James,
All of that pontificating about we need better, but fine. But the role of the Democratic Party is not to beat other Democrats; is to beat other Republicans. That is my sole issue with what you're doing, David. Most of this, if we talk 85% of the things you want, I want the same thing.
right.
Well, we just will have a fundamental ethical difference on being an official in the Democratic Party and raising $20 million to beat other Democrats.
James, let me be clear, and I've said this in many interviews, and
Okay,
thankfully I'm able to tell this to you straight
sure,
right
go
now.
ahead.
We are not challenging people that are in frontline races. I do not want us to risk losing the House because somebody is mad that somebody voted one way that they didn't like. And part of the philosophy that I have here, James, is that two things in particular happened that caused me to do this. I had a friend call me from college who said, I'm so pissed that my member of Congress voted a certain way. I'm going to primary them. And I said, whoa, who is your Democratic member of Congress? And it was somebody in a D+3 seat in a swing state. And I said, I understand you're angry. Do not do that because you could cost us the House. And then when I was at the National Finance Committee retreat, we saw this data from one of our data people for the DNC about what our approval rating is.
Right,
And our approval rating was terrible. And I asked them, what did this look like before the Tea Party happened for Republicans? And you know what they said, James? Identical.
right.
And I thought to myself, I am extremely worried right now that we're about to have a wildfire that burns everything down. And we need to make sure that we handle the divisions that we have in our party in safe seats in the first
Let me get this straight. You are still planning on raising money to primary other Democrats. That's that's your plan.
We're
You're
doing
gonna
both,
raise
James.
20 let me finish and then you answer. You're going to raise $20 million to primary yet unspecified Democrats. I think that's an abomination.
Some of the money is going to be used to challenge Democrats that we feel like are failing to meet the moment. However, a lot of it is going to be used to spend money in critical state legislative races that are critical to breaking majorities and also in open primaries in those state legislative seats. It's not only going to challenge people that are Democrats, to be clear.
Well, again, if somebody wants to challenge on their own another Democrat, that's more power to him. I bet the Democratic Party should always be about democracy. But I remain manifestly unpersuaded that an official of the DNC or somebody who can go out and raise money to use to beat Republicans would use money to beat Democrats. And I mean, David, I've never changed my mind on that.
And here's the deal,
Violates
James.
every ethical principle that I've ever developed in my life.
James, there currently, in the past, there have been vice chairs previously who had done exactly what I am doing now, where they supported people in primaries while they were vice chairs of the DNC while they were out there. And part of the reason that is not a conflict of interest is because there isn't information that we have access to that could sway these elections in any serious way. What the DNC has a rollover is specifically the presidential election. And in our bylaws, it does say you cannot be involved in the primary process. And I completely agree with that. Completely. I do not want to repeat of 2016 here. But the fact of the matter is, James, there have been
I
vice
don't,
chairs previously
I,
who have done very similar things to
I
what
don't understand. You're not
who are
going to
they?
raise money to run against Democrats, or you are going to raise money to run against other Democrats.
we're
You're
raising
going to do that.
we're raising
You're
money to
going to do that.
Democrats.
That is an
And
ethical
James,
abomination.
you have to understand the nuance here.
There's no nuance to it. It's just flat out wrong. It's
And
flat out wrong to
you're
use money
entitled to
that
have
we
that
could be
opinion.
used
But
to beat other
here's the
Republicans
deal,
to beat
James.
Democrats.
What is your plan to deal with our abominable approval rating?
Of,
What
of,
is
of
what
win
is it?
elections, win elections. You see, against Republicans.
We
Don't
can't win
do.
with our
Let me
approval rating
finish,
at this
okay?
rate.
Let me finish. You are my strategy. It is to win elections. It's not to win an election in Queens, okay, which you don't ever run against a Republican. It is to help Democrats win elections. Of which, by the way, I called on Joe Biden to drop out of the race in 2022. Where were you? Where was the young cool generation coming? Did they step in there and say something? I spoke out against the horrific language of identity politics. Where was everybody else? I said we should have a contested convention. No one else came together other than President Obama, who was trying to call people on a day that President Biden dropped out. So if I'm just saying, I want to beat Republicans. I don't want to beat Democrats. That's my life mission.
I want to defeat Republicans as well. And what I'll say, James, is I imagine if we didn't have Hakeem Jeffries right now, who got here through primarying Democrats multiple times. Imagine if we
Yeah,
didn't
he
have
can primary who he wants. The DNC shouldn't raise money to be involved in a Democratic primary.
this is not the
Bill
DNC.
Clinton was involved in a primary. Barack Obama was involved in a primary. I don't have any problem with that, son. What I got a problem with is an official of the Democratic Party raising money to beat other Democrats.
But you didn't have
That's
a
my
problem with
problem.
it in the past when former vice chairs were doing that as well.
I don't know
David,
what other vice chairs did. I never gave a shit who the vice chair was.
It is a
Tell you the
large.
truth, at least you've elevated the
There is
position
a
to
conflict
something
of
it
interest.
is.
David, you've said a bunch of times that you don't want a repeat of 2016. Like, how do you see this moment as being a repeat of 2016?
No, I was saying that in the context specifically of why I wouldn't be involved in the presidential primary, because I agree that DNC officers, as members of the committee that have oversight over the primary, over a ton of things related to the presidential campaign, should not be involved in the presidential primary, and that is in our bylaws in the first place. The point that I'm making is that if James is so upset about what I'm doing here, where was he when other vice chairs were doing very similar things being involved? If this is such
Name you one.
clear, James.
Name you one vice chair of the DNC in its entire history, other than you, David. To be honest with you, and I never saw any of them
That's why
publicly say they were. Again, if I would have seen it, I would have said something. I promise you. This is not directed at you. It's directed at the general principle of an official of a political party spending time raising money to beat other members of that political party. That
I
is my
think
specific.
the only thing I would say, James, is in David's defense, like I actually ran this whole idea of what David is doing by my father, who's a boomer, and he, I said to him, "What do you think about this?" And like in his mind, he was thinking, "Well, I think the Democratic Party needs to clear out.
Right,
Like they need
great,
to clean house."
great.
And how else do you clean house? You
But
can't force people.
you can clean house without having officials of the party raising money to beat other Democrats. Anybody can run for anything they want. Okay,
James,
that's not the question. The question is specifically, as a official and as a fiduciary duty to the party that you represent, should you be raising money to run against people of that party? And again, this is not even an ethical close call to me. I don't care if you run for what you want. All right. If they think that the problem is some older Democrat in a +2R district, I got news for you. That's not our problem. Our problem is
What about the fact that all these older Democrats are
I
hanging
don't want
on
to
to their
argue that. You
seats,
can
though?
argue that
Yeah.
all you want. I'm not arguing that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, I'm saying one specific thing. Don't try to make this an argument into something else. Whether or not some incumbent that's been there 20 years should remain, let their voters in their district decide that. What I'm saying is, it is not the job of the Democratic Party to raise money to defeat other Democrats. That's my simple thing, and I'm not going to change.
And let me say this much. What people think of our leaders nationally shapes how they think of the Democratic Party, which affects who they vote for, including in those swing districts that we agree we both care about, that we want to defeat Republicans in and defend our very vulnerable members there. And who our leaders are in our positions of the Democratic Party It affects what people think of us in the first place. That is part of this overall. We have a major problem here, James, and the issue that I have is
I,
that you say that we agree. We both want to
I,
defeat Republicans and win, right? But my question is, besides saying let's just get a majority to address that approval rating, how do you think we can win with an approval
That's the
rating?
job. The job of the Democratic Party is to win elections for
But
Democrats.
answer the question, James.
That's its raison d'etre.
People have
Okay, it's not.
a poor
Go ahead.
perception
I'm
of the
sorry.
party. You
I'm
have
sorry
to
for
change.
speaking while you interrupted me. Go ahead.
You interrupted me, so let me
Go
finish.
ahead.
People have such a poor perception of our party. We have to change, and we can't just change our words. We have to change who we are. That's my point.
I will reiterate. That's fine. You can change who we are. You can run anything you want. I think it is an abomination for an official of the Democratic Party to spend time raising money to beat other Democrats. There may be things that the party does that I don't like, or maybe I would support somebody in a primary. I generally don't, but I could see myself doing that. I wouldn't have any problem with that. But when you are an official of an organization and the purpose of the organization is to defeat Republicans and elect Democrats, and you're trying to defeat Democrats, yeah, I'm just flummoxed by the whole thing. A guy of my generation, and maybe I'm old, but I think you should be loyal to things. Or you hold a position at GM, you shouldn't be trying to sell Fords. Okay, that's just
James, let me be
I
clear.
think.
Let me be extremely clear. I am not trying to defeat Democrats. I am trying to replace Democrats with better
Well,
Democrats.
you're running against them in a primary. I don't know what you're trying to do, but you're trying to beat them if you get involved in a primary. You're raising money to beat a Democrat. When
If
I
it's
think your money would be much better raised toward, say, Maine or North Carolina or Mississippi or Iowa or maybe Texas, maybe Florida, or places that we are defending seats in Georgia. We got a we got a big agenda, of really good people that we got to defend. In some places we got to promote, and I think it is an ethical abomination to spend that time and money by an official of the party to beat other Democrats.
ultimately, James, we agree on fundamentally what matters most here, which is defeating Republicans. We have different strategies of how to go about that. But look, we spent $2 billion last election cycle only to lose by 230,000 votes in 3 states.
Right.
What I'm trying to address here is giving them options in safe seats so that where we know that it's going to be a Democrat who's elected no matter what, we're trying to elect the best Democrats possible and support people that are in critical frontline races at the same time, which is healthy and we can do.
Let me address that.
Let me say one last thing,
Go ahead.
James.
Go ahead.
I understand what you're saying about how you feel like this is a conflict of interest.
I'm glad you understand. I'm trying to be clear.
Let me provide my where I am at with this. When I ran in this position, they did not have a sign anything saying that you can't be involved in primaries. I also looked at former vice chairs who had been involved in primaries, who had endorsed in primaries, and I read the bylaws as well. They're now trying to change those bylaws. And if they want to change them and say that officers can't be involved in primaries whatsoever, look, I think what should happen is they should grandfather in the current officers of the DNC into that policy and develop a firewall policy inside of the DNC to say, okay, you're not going to know anything that has to go on with these congressional elections or state legislative elections to ensure that there is no potential conflict of interest there. But we understand this is what's going to happen, James, that there is going to be future members, future vice chairs of the DNC who the president appoints, and they're going to have leadership PACs. They're going to have other PACs that support people that are incumbents and others in primaries. And I do not believe that the president is going to allow them to be removed because they violate this rule. I don't believe that's going to happen.
Again, I don't know what the rule is. I don't care what the rule is. I don't know. I can't name one previous DNC vice chair. I think it's an abomination to be an official of a political party and raise money to defeat members of said political party.
So do you think
that I can't be? I can't. Now let me finish.
Question, James?
Let's talk about the Harris campaign and the $2 billion because it actually was $2.5 billion. And
At the time, though, James, you did think that Harris was going to win at one point, right?
Okay, so I made a bad election call. What do you want me to do?
Okay.
Go put knives under my fingernails? I mean, I thought we were going to win an election. All right. But one of the things that David touched on, when Ken Martin called me back, I think it was January, he was running for DNC chair. And I said, sir, a lot of friends in Minnesota think very highly of you. It's generally not my thing. I don't got into DNC politics. But what I think you should do is Future Forward spent $1 billion, the campaign spent $1.5 billion. Now you're on to something. And why don't the DNC spend its time doing, I don't know, an audit of after
That's a
action
good
report and
question.
say, how did we spend so much money and not get anything? I would be totally for that. We spent $2.5 billion and didn't get a single vote we were not going to get in the first place. And if you ask me, I think is a legitimate function of the DNC is to say, let's look and see where this money went. And let's see, because part of my thinking is that, well, we had more money, we had more surrogates, we had more storefront headquarters, we had more door knockers, we had more organization. Thought the race was tied. None of that did us very much good. So if they want to go and find out how $2.5 billion went down the drain to no effect, I'm all for that. I'm 1,000% for that. And there are people that are going around now that are doing massive research on not just younger voters, but working class voters. And I think let's wait till this research comes out, but I think we're going to see some illumination here. But I'm all for it. I think you should appoint a special committee to find out, all right, we spent all this money and we made it, we lost, we didn't get anybody we should. How do we spend it better? I'd be so for that. I'd get a baton and a whistle and throw it in the air and be in the parade.
Yeah, David, why hasn't the party done an autopsy?
They should, and I would ask our chair Ken Martin
If you
specifically.
can put my name in to say David
Have
Hogg,
you
James
asked
Carville,
though?
make a joint resolution. We should do this, and I'll be glad. And you can ask Chairman Martin to call me because that is exactly the conversation we had back in January.
Yeah. Have you
Find out
asked? Like,
what-
is there a reason why this hasn't happened? Have you
There's
asked
been
already?
discussions about it, and I can't speak for our chair. It's not to say that he wouldn't support it by any means. I'm
Right.
saying I legitimately cannot speak for him. And
I think there's a very legitimate use.
I agree with you, though, James. To be extremely clear, there should be a very transparent and thorough effort and an analysis and audit of where the
Right.
money went in the election. There absolutely should be.
And I'm not suggesting, I don't think you are either, that anything nefarious happened. That's not what I'm suggesting at all.
No.
I'm saying how was the money allocated? What did it do? What did we did that didn't work? And basically on election day, we got every vote we were going to get on Labor Day. I mean, I don't think we got one single new voter, and we just got to ask ourselves. And maybe we ought to go into it with an open mind. But this is an election we should have never lost. It was completely inflicted by Democrats. It was completely afflicted by the fascination with esoteric language that blew up in our face. It was completely that Biden stayed in the race to July the 21st. It was completely because we had staggering talent around the country. That's one of the things that I believe, and I hope, David, that y'all have a mini convention in 26 and invite all this breathtaking talent in the party to address it and show the American people the amount of talent that we have in the Democratic Party. I'd be glad to work with that, with
That'd be great.
anybody, support any audit, support some kind of mini convention or cattle call. Let these people come and make their case to the members of the Democratic National Committee. I'd be all for that. I think there are things we can do. I just don't think primary other Democrats is what we should do.
Well, it does seem like the party enthusiasm right now is behind Bernie and AOC. Like they're the ones
People
drawing the
win
huge
an
crowds.
election. Okay, they never. I'm just the progressive left never beats that. Bernie ran for president twice. He lost twice. They had the most progressive group of candidates you ever had in 2020. They all got beat terribly, and it wasn't rigged. People voted how they voted. It wouldn't matter what somebody did. Just how many times do people have to say, this is not what we're looking for? Look at what people like Senator Slotkin are saying right now. Look at people that say that this is not a brand that people run. David has one thing that we have too many old people. I think that we allowed ourselves to be defined by idiotic statements like defund the police, which I've called the three stupidest words in the history of the English language. But I'm for looking for a reason, and if somebody convinced me there's a better reason, I'm for it. But I've never seen one of these lefties beat a Republican in a swing state. Vermont is the most democratic, highest cooked PBI Democrat of any state in the country. New York 14th, I guess it is. I don't maybe I've got my numbers wrong. Plus 27. That does not impress me. That what in
Mhm.
crowds do not impress me. What impresses me are elections and election returns. And I
Right.
think we
But
need to,
they're filling the messaging void right
well,
now
you know
because
what?
they're being
This is April. If we
yeah.
fight on this tax cut and these Medicare cuts, I guarantee you, image of the party will go up because we'll be framing issues that are gifts to us. Literally, we have a gift coming to us in the next probably 60 days, and they're going to have hell on wheels. And their support is crumbling right now. It's the lowest it's been anywhere. They'll fight with each other. I think we can break through. I really do.
How does the party avoid picking another seventh string quarterback
They
like
never,
Kamala
we
Harris?
didn't pick the seventh string quarterback. Okay, understand
Yeah.
that. If we'd have had tryouts,
Yeah.
we could have won with the third string quarterback. We'd have won by 3 points. Okay,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to. But we didn't get a chance to kick. But
Right.
President Obama was frantically trying to call people on the afternoon of July 21st. If you remember, I said we should have 4 town halls with President Clinton, President Obama invite 6, 7, 8 people to there and let them decide. But the Democratic Party did not pick this candidate.
Mm.
This candidate was, we were told, this is the seventh string quarterback and you're going to play with this. Okay. So we played with
Okay.
it. We lost.
Okay. You both seem to agree though that the party's lost men. So how do you do it? How do you bring men back?
Go ahead, David. I'll go first if you want to. I want to hear what you have to say, actually.
Yeah, David, how do
Look,
you guys
I
bring
mean,
men back?
to be honest with you, I think that a lot of the young men that we have lost, I can't talk about older men in particular, obviously, but like, um, I can talk about younger ones. What I'll say is I think a lot of them don't necessarily disagree with, a lot of things that James and I have talked about here, whether it's taxing the wealthy more in order to make it easier for working class people to get by, in order to get things like a first home or something like that. I don't think they disagree that we need to address a lot of critical issues, whether it's education, whether it's other things. The problem is they would rather vote for somebody who they don't feel like they're going to be judged by all the time, even if they don't completely agree with them, than somebody who they do agree with largely, that they feel like they have to walk on eggshells around constantly because they feel like they might say something wrong or whatever else it might be, and they're going to be pushed out or excommunicated or something like that. I think that's a lot of it. And I also think part of it, more sociologically speaking, is the fact that there is, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, James, because you have done a lot of work on elections around the world. So
Right.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts. This gender polarization we're seeing is happening in every country that is
Right.
industrialized. Basically, it's not just like, oh, Democrats have a bad message for young men. It is happening in Japan. It is happening in South Korea.
Right.
It is happening in all of these more developed countries. So I'm curious to hear from you, James, because that says to me that it is a bigger issue than just like, oh, Democrats have a bad message, and that could be part of it. But I'm curious to hear from you why you think that's such a global phenomenon and what's driving it.
I agree with you. And the global stuff, I'm sort of aware of, but I'm more acutely aware of what's going on in the United States. And I think the Democratic Party has what I would call an NPR problem. Don't eat hamburgers, don't watch football, don't drink beer. It's all bad for you. And like, God damn, man, get off my ass for a minute. And I think it's something like that. I think Democrats come across as like culturally superior. We know what's good for you. And again, they want the minimum wage. I don't know why. My critique of the Harris campaign, why wouldn't we for accent raising the minimum wage? Give America a raise. Let's tax rich people and give this money to young people. And you're right. And men, I taught 3 years at community college, 9 years at Tulane, I think 4 at LSU. And I had this phenomena, and other people that have taught have told me the same thing. The girls just kick the shit out of these
Yeah,
boys.
I was
These
actually
just
going to
they
bring
get
that up without
they're all
but
sitting in the room, and y'all back there like farting around. It's not the world you live in. You better get competitive here, you
yeah.
know. And
I have a brother who's 10 years younger than me, and I hear him often talk about this. He's gone very rightward, Ben Shapiro, Tucker world, but I do sense that there's a lot of job insecurity, especially when it comes to competing against women for jobs. I mean,
there is, and
we're there's more of us in
yeah, I
college.
can't help you if you don't study hard enough. But what I can help you is get a raise.
James,
And
I'll
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I completely agree with you. I think the same thing. We're talking about the same thing with different words around this issue of like the NPR problem, where we
Right,
do feel just so goddamn judgmental. And I learned this when I was in college and I actually joined the shooting club because I wanted to talk to the people who disagreed with me most.
right.
As you can imagine, James, I was very popular there. Right? Um, and what
I
I
shot
learned
my first gun at 3, by the way.
was when I was in fourth grade because my dad was an FBI agent.
Oh, well,
The
there you go.
the reason why, though, what I learned from that experience and talking to a lot of the people who hate me most, even people who said that things like the shooting at my high school never happened, and others, is that a lot of the people who disagree with us, it's not so much that they disagree with us, it's that they feel judged, disrespected, and looked down upon. And a lot of the time, I think if we can figure out how to work together and have those conversations that are difficult, I'll tell you this much, James, and I'm sure you'll agree with this. This idea that it is not my job to educate you is fucking ridiculous. If you're in politics, it is your goddamn job to talk to somebody that you don't agree with and learn how to have
Nothing
that
wrong with that.
conversation, right?
I go with Fox all the time.
Exactly.
I'm
And
doing I'm doing Will Kane's
what I
podcast after this. I
right.
completely agree with that.
What I think we need to do here, especially with our younger people, is show that we're not only are we the party of sanity, but also we're not judgmental assholes,
Correct.
right?
So
And that's
so
why
agree.
I think back in the day
So
when you helped to get Bill Clinton elected, I think that was part of the reason why is because we didn't come off as judgmental assholes. We were cool, right?
we're in what we call vigorous agreement here. And I think
I
that
never
you and
thought we would be here,
we get
guys.
That's a
five
great place
great
for us to
things
end.
that we agree on, and we're just going to disagree on the other thing. But I think you're totally spot on with men. I think that we're totally spot on at where the ship did the $2.5 billion go. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not suggesting that somebody did anything nefarious. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. I'm suggesting that the money was not spent wisely. Or what did the research say? What were we being told as we were allocating this money in real time? Because the next presidential campaign manager is going to have, when an airplane crashes, people don't say, oh, well, shit, it was just a mistake. We'll just move on to the next thing. No,
No,
no, no, no.
especially when it's a $2 billion airplane.
Right. It's a big airplane that crashed.
And let's
Let's see if we can identify what we could have done better. Maybe we did something right. I can't think of it right now. In terms of, I love Pope Francis. I'm cradle Catholic. Who am I to judge? I wish NPR would just put that over every host. Who am I to judge?
right.
Instead of just judging people and their habits and their shortcomings and their failings. And I like I say, I think on two huge issues, we're in 1,000% agreement. And I think we got to show how these tax cuts. If you're 24 years old, okay, I think you're 25, aren't you, David?
I just turned 25, that's right.
You just turned. Okay. How much is this going to cost you? Because they're going to add $4.5 trillion for nothing to give the money to their billionaire friends. I mean, if they were spending the money building bridges or airports or the compute, I don't know, whatever, then that would be one thing. You would benefit for that. You're not going to benefit by shit for giving, Jeff Bezos another $40 million tax cut.
And I think James, on this point, the two last things that I want to say because I got to get going here, is one, I think when I ran for this position at the DNC, one of the questions that came up is like, should Joe Biden have dropped out? And obviously the answer is yes. He ended up deciding to do that himself. And when people asked like, well, why did we lose the election? I said two things. I said, look, voters told us two things predominantly. They said the president is way too old and also that prices are too high. And effectively, with $2 billion behind us, we said, no, he's not, then yes, he is. And then no, they aren't. Look at this graph of the G7 or the S&P 500 or whatever else it is. As a party, I think what I would imagine you agree with, James, here, is that we got to stop telling people how to feel and instead listen to how they feel and explain what we're doing to actually address that in the first place. And that is where we got to start right there, is just with that honesty more than anything and just addressing how people feel.
I just, not to be I was saying it in the fall of 2022, consistently saying he's too old. And I said, look, at the time I was 79. I have some idea what the job of president entails. I know what aging entails. They're not compatible. It doesn't
But
work that way.
how does the party move
And
forward from that? Like, how do they just say, like, okay, how do they message
You just
around
move
that?
forward. Don't talk about it. Just move forward. Fight the goddamn tax cuts. Fight the Medicare
Hmm.
things. Come up with a plan where you're going to take money and take it from old rich people and empower
Hmm.
young people and give them the advantages. And
exactly,
because young people think they're totally fucked in this
they
society,
do.
and they
They
are.
do.
And
And
Hmm.
what I,
Scott Galloway, if you ever watch that Scott Galloway TED Talk,
of course,
it's
Yeah,
great.
utterly brilliant.
It's
Utterly
brilliant.
brilliant.
depressing.
And I
Yeah,
think,
but the reason it is because it's true. So let's
Yeah,
get a plan, and if we want to get young people back, let's stop giving them, the back of our hand and give them a helping hand. People
exactly.
like me, I don't need a freaking tax cut. Well, I don't have much income anymore anyway, to tell you the truth. But,
Right.
but the Scott Galloway stuff is right, and we want to empower that kind of thing, I'm 1,000% for it.
And as the last thing that I say here, I want to address what you said, James, about the dropping out stuff. I've talked about this publicly. When I met with President Biden, it was in 2023 in like September or something like that. Maybe it was like early October. When I met with him and he asked me, how do I win young people? What I wish I said is that you need to drop out. Of course, I would have been laughed out of the room. I would not have been taken
Understand?
seriously, but at least I would have told him what he needed to hear rather than what he wanted to hear. Even if we don't agree here completely, James, part of what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to ensure that, frankly, that's one of my biggest regrets is not saying that. And I I'm thankful that you did, James, and I'm not gonna forget that mistake that I made, and that's why I'm trying to speak out now and do what I think is right in this moment.
Don't feel bad. If I would have been you,
oh,
I would have never done this. If I'd have been 25 years old and wanted some future in democratic politics, I was able to do it because there was nothing they could do to me. All right. And you should not feel bad about it. All right. You should not feel bad at all. You knew the way you felt. And by the way, not many people did. And people would call me and say, man, you can say this shit, but I'll get in trouble if I say it. I said, you're right. But because I can say it, I'm going to say it.
Exactly.
And if I had to,
yeah. Where
I
were the
was,
party elders? Where were the people who were working for him at the time? Like
Right.
they were the ones.
if I were you, I would not feel bad. I can assure you that if I were in your situation at a comparable time in my life in a comparable position, I would have done exactly what you did.
And what I'm trying to change, thank you for saying that. I think what I'm trying to change here, and broadly speaking, the culture that we need to change in our party is we need to build a culture where people are told what they need to hear rather than just what they want to hear a lot of the time. And I think that's a major part of what we've got to change.
Sometimes what people want to hear is what they need to hear. That there's been a massive transfer of wealth to old rich people.
Of course. I'm
Basically,
talking about inside
I
of politics.
understand. I'm not disagreeing or nitpicking. You know, I, I think that we had a productive discussion. I hope you can take some of this stuff and move forward and stop telling people to stop judging other people. And let's talk about how we can transfer opportunity down in this country, down
Let's do it.
economically, demographically, chronologically, everything that we can. Old rich people are just kicking the shit out of young people who are trying to get it made.
And what scares me the most about this moment, James, is that those young people, I am deeply, deeply, deeply worried are losing faith in
I am
democracy.
too. I am too.
Not only because they're having the shit kicked out of them, but because of the school shootings they're
Yeah,
being put
yeah,
through.
I
And
do
like,
too. And I have
yeah,
daughters who
I'm not saying that you don't agree with this, James. I'm just,
I don't. Not only do I agree with you, I profoundly agree with you. It's not like, hey, yeah, okay, we agreed
yeah.
that Dobbs was bad law. No, this is something that I think we should do, and I think if we did it and talked about it, and again, I come back to these tax cuts are just going to give us
Right.
a golden opportunity to be heard.
Do you think that the next, leader of the party who runs in 2028, that they should be a younger person coming
Well,
maybe
I
from
think
the
so. I think we have so
millennials?
much talent. I can't wait to get them all in front of people.
Who are you guys excited about?
I can't talk. I literally cannot talk about that because it's against
I
the.
understand, and that's good. Or should you? If I start naming names, somebody will say I didn't. But just look across, and we have gubernatorial candidates. We got, governors. We got senators. We got all kinds of people who are just world-class communicators.
Mm.
And I think that when people see the Democratic Party, in fact, I know this to be a fact, because they think we're urban and we old. In a lot of places we don't exist. But if we start talking about younger people and how we can affect that, I think we have a chance for an opening here. I really do.
Thank you guys both for coming on. That was another episode of the Tara Palmeri Show. Smash that subscribe button and share this with your friends. Also comment, like. You can get all of my reporting straight to your inbox by going to tarapalmeri.com and signing up for my newsletter, The Red Letter. You can also listen to the Tara Palmeri Show wherever you get your podcasts. That's Spotify, Apple, Amazon, you name it. See you again soon.